Hello and welcome back to the Walk and Talk for another deep dive into all things dog training and behaviour. I hope you're well. I hope you and your dogs have had an amazing week. But most importantly of all, I hope that you listened to last week's episode and you are now 7 days into your month of progress with whatever it was that you chose to focus your energy and your efforts on for the month of September. If you are listening to this and you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about because you didn't listen to last week's episode, don't worry, I won't hold it against you. But guess what? You can still go back and listen to it today. There's still plenty of time. In fact, there's an eternity of time. It'll be there forever. And it's still only the 12th of September. The autumn is young. In fact, actually, it's not technically autumn yet, is it? Isn't it like the 21st, 23rd? I don't know, whenever it is. It's still summer for like another week or so, even though it probably doesn't feel like it. But my point is, you don't need to abandon doing something really cool this month just because you didn't start on day one. It's like that famous saying about planting trees, which I actually remember so vaguely that I'm probably about to butcher it, but here goes anyway. No, I think this is right. The best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So if you have not yet listened to that episode and you have absolutely no idea what the hell's going on, go back, have a listen, take the action, and you can catch up with the rest of us. Anyway, enough about last week's episode. Let's get on with this week's episode. So today we're going to have one of those conversations that has the power to change absolutely everything about how you see your dog's behavior, because we're going to be tackling the myth of the so-called bad dog. And I say bad dog in air quotes, right? And we're going to very helpfully reframe those frustrating, embarrassing, and just plain stressful for us sometimes behaviors through the lens of behavioral science. Because despite what you may or may not have heard any of the big bearded Cockney dog trainers on Instagram saying, your dog's behavior is never about stubbornness or defiance or dominance. It's about one really simple thing, ultimately, right? And that thing is just reinforcement. Because no behavior happens in a vacuum, does it? It happens because it works for your dog. Just let that single sentence swim around and land fully for a second. Your dog chooses and performs any given behavior in any given situation because it works. It might not work for you, probably pisses you off, but it works for them. It's like every time you get a headache, right? You probably take headache tablets. Why do you take the tablets? Why do you choose that action, that behavior every time you get a headache? So why do you choose that action in that situation? You take headache tablets when you get a headache because they work. The headache goes away. If you want to get sciencey, we call it negative reinforcement. You were experiencing something bad, you took an action, and the bad experience ended. You take the tablets because the tablets work. Your nervous or fear-reactive dog barks and lunges every time they see another dog. So you turn around and you get the hell out of there because you're mortified probably. And it's exactly the same thing. The behavior works. Your dog wanted more space, so they chose the behavior that got them more space. And once you just understand that basic principle, you gain the most powerful lever in dog training, because now you know what's going on. You can shift that reinforcement. So my hope is that by the end of this episode, you will see your dog's bad behavior, air quotes again. You'll see that it isn't really bad at all. It's simply effective. And if you want to change it, you have to make an alternative behavior of your choice more effective than the one they've chosen. So let's start with some foundations. Okay. In behavioral science, we talk about the ABC model, and that is just an acronym for the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. ABC. The antecedent is the trigger, the cue, the thing that happens before the behavior, that makes the behavior happen. The behavior is obviously what your dog chooses to do in response. And the consequence is the outcome, the payoff, the reinforcement, the thing that happens as a result. And guess what? The consequence is where the magic happens. Ultimately, reinforcement is simply anything that makes a behavior more likely to happen. That could be food, of course, right? But it could also be attention. It could be access to something. It might be the removal of pressure. So, halter collars and some harnesses work in this way, like applying a tightening pressure until the dog slows down and slackens the lead. Or it might even be the sheer simple joy of doing the thing in the first place, because some behaviors themselves are just intrinsically reinforcing. Let's not forget, chasing squirrels feels good to most, if not all, dogs, whether they catch the squirrel or not. It's just the behavior itself that feels good. So let's look at some examples we're probably all familiar with, right? Your dog jumps up. They jump up at you. They get eye contact. They get probably your hands on them. They get you shouting, "Get down, get down." That's reinforcement achieved for your dog. They've got all of that engagement, that juicy attention that they wanted. Another example, your dog barks at the window and the scary postman walks away. He was going to walk away anyway. But for your dog, that is also reinforcement achieved as far as they're concerned. Another example, your dog pulls on the lead and they get to the park faster, or they get access to that interesting smell quicker, or they wrap their mouth around that KFC wrapper on the footpath that you didn't spot in time to pull them away. Again, reinforcement achieved. Now, in none of these scenarios is your dog actually being naughty. They are being very effective because they're just making the world work for them. And our job as their owners and their guardians and their educators is not to punish effectiveness, is it? It's to redirect it. So, how do we redirect? Well, this is where functional analysis comes in. And functional analysis sounds like a big thing, but it really isn't. It simply means asking, what is this behavior doing for my dog? What function is it serving? Because once you know the function, you can design a training plan that addresses that need without your dog relying on that unwanted behavior to get there. So let's break this down into the 4 classic reinforcement functions, okay? Number 1, we have attention. The dog wants your focus, and things like jumping, barking, pawing at you, well, they all tend to work, don't they? So if the function is attention, let's teach an alternative behavior that still gains them that attention. Now, kind of the opposite side of the fence, we have escape or avoidance of something as another function. The dog wants to get out of an unpleasant situation, and that could be anything. It could be a harness going on, it could be the nail clippers appearing, or any kind of overwhelming environment. And if we decide that the function is escape, we work on choice, desensitization possibly, and giving the dog agency so they don't need to fight to get away. They don't need to rely on those behaviors. Another common one is just access to tangible things or to the environment more generally. So the dog wants the thing, the food on the counter, the squirrel over there. They want to get on the sofa. They want the faster route to the park, whatever it is. If the function is access, we create structured ways for them to earn it, again, through alternative behaviors that we prefer. And finally, like I mentioned earlier, the 4th function is slightly trickier, and that is automatic reinforcement. The behavior just feels good in itself. And that covers a lot of things like chewing, digging, spinning in some cases, chasing, obviously. These can be self-rewarding. And if the function is automatic, we need to provide alternative outlets that meet the same sensory or emotional need, but just in healthier, happier ways. And I think the brilliance of this lens and looking at it this way is that it just takes morality out of behavior, because your dog isn't plotting to annoy you. They're just simply running the behavioral economy of their life. And when we, as their trainers or owners, misinterpret that economy, we are doing nothing useful except setting ourselves up for frustration simply because we've misunderstood what's going on. So let's shine a light on some of the most common misconceptions about bad behavior. And the first one that I hear a lot is this: oh, he knows it's wrong. He knows he shouldn't be doing it, but he does it anyway. Now, the main problem with this is that dogs don't work in moral codes of right and wrong. That's giving them far too much credit, right? No offense to dogs, they're absolutely awesome, obviously, but they just work in outcomes. So if shredding the cushion on the sofa reduces their boredom, it's not wrong, it's just effective. It is our job to offer a different outlet for that same need. She's just so stubborn is another really common one. My dog is so stubborn. Now, stubbornness suggests a personality flaw, but when we step back, what's usually happening is that the reinforcement for not complying simply outweighs the reinforcement on offer for complying with whatever the request is. For instance, calling your dog away when they're playing with another dog, them responding to that just isn't as reinforcing as continuing the play. If you're recalling your dog and he knows you're only holding a single dried out chicken treat, and at the same time, he also knows he is currently having the time of his life running circles with this goofy Labrador he's just met at the park, that's not stubbornness, that's just economics. The maths is not mathing in your favour in this moment. Now, this example, as an aside, is one of the reasons I love to teach an unpredictable schedule of reward, especially when it comes to recall, because if your dog knows what the reward is, because you always give them the same reward, then they are in a position where they are able to do that maths. But if they don't know, and it could be anything that you're going to reward them with, because you always mix it up, well, that changes the game a little bit, cognitively speaking. The maths is a little bit harder for them, and you're more likely to come out on top. But right, that's a whole nother topic for another day. Unpredictable reinforcement. We will circle back to that in another episode. An oldie but a goodie, obviously, is always, oh, he's just being dominant. He's just trying to dominate me. Now, it's not goody, obviously. This one is actually really harmful because the dominance narrative frames behavior as a power struggle, when in reality, it's just a reinforcement struggle. Pulling on the lead isn't dominance, it's access. Barking at other dogs isn't dominance, it's escape or attention or fear or whatever. Reframing dominance as reinforcement allows us to actually solve the problem instead of punishing the symptom. And again, I'm not saying that the concept of dominance doesn't exist. Of course it does. Social animals always exist within social hierarchies to a greater or lesser extent. But with dogs, these are actually really fluid and they fluctuate moment to moment, depending on so many things. Again, this is a really massive topic. We'll save it for a podcast episode of its own one day. For now, let's move on to the $1 million question. If all behavior is about reinforcement, how do we change it? Okay, so let's walk through the key strategies together. First up, we need to identify the current reinforcer. Before you can change anything, you need clarity. You need to know what's going on. So what is the dog getting out of this? Look closely at the consequence. Remember the C of the ABC. Next, control access to the current reinforcer. If the behavior keeps working for your dog, it will just keep happening. Now, that means you need to set up management strategies so the dog can't practice the old behavior. Now, depending on what that behavior is, this could mean you need to get some baby gates up in your house, or you need to have a long line on your dog out on walks, or you need to get some window film in your windows. These aren't failures or cop-outs or cheats in the slightest. They are part of shaping new habits, and they're really important. Alongside this, offer your dog an alternative behavior that works. Because dogs don't stop doing things, they start doing something else. So your job is to teach and heavily reinforce an alternative behavior that achieves the same function. If I walk into a room full of people picking their noses, for example, and I want them to stop, I could say, stop picking your nose. Or I could say, okay, everybody, grab a tissue from this box and blow your nose. The second one is an alternative behavior that delivers the outcome that I want it to, which is no more nose picking, and probably the outcome they were after anyway, because now there's nothing in their nose. So, to bring this disgusting analogy back to dogs, instead of jumping for attention, reinforce a sit or a chin rest with attention instead. And if you can, make the new reinforcer bigger and better than it was before. And this is where your creativity comes in, because you're not just competing with the old payoff, you are out competing it. You have to trump it. And that might mean higher value food, more enthusiastic play, or more frequent reinforcement. Remember, dogs are economists. They will just invest where the returns are highest, where the results are the most effective. So, next up, it's time to build reinforcement histories, because one single success is not enough. Behavior changes when the reinforcement history is stacked in favor of the new behavior over the old one. And that means repetition, consistency, and patience. Think of it as building a savings account of reinforcement for the behaviors you want. And if you're listening to this and thinking, wow, this makes sense, but I still don't really know where to start. This is exactly why I created my 21-day engagement training program. Engagement is the foundation that makes shifting reinforcement possible. Because if your dog is more focused on you, more connected, and more invested in working with you than all the other stuff that's going on, you suddenly have the power to redirect behavior in real time. It is 3 weeks of step-by-step science-led training to build the kind of reinforcement history that makes you your dog's favorite payoff. You can find it at listendogtraining.com, and podcast listeners, the awesome human beings that you are, you can use the discount code podcast10 for 10% off as well. Now, let's look at the bigger picture, right? When you zoom out, this approach does more than change behavior. Long term, it's going to change your whole relationship with your dog, because instead of seeing them as defiant, you now see them as strategic. You now understand what's going on. Instead of battling against them, you can collaborate with them. And that shift in your perspective creates a deeper bond and a more joyful partnership, and a dog who feels safe, they feel understood, and they are motivated. Because let's not forget, all of us listening to this, made a big decision and spent a considerable amount of money, most likely, deciding to get a dog in the first place. And what was that for? Like, why did we even do that if it wasn't to experience this incredible cross-species relationship and companionship and partnership that is absolutely possible for you to achieve? So the next time your dog does something you label as bad, just pause for a second and ask, okay, hang on. What's the reinforcement here? What's the payoff? And how can I create a better one? Because at the end of the day, behavior is not about good or bad where your dog is concerned. It's about what works. And when we change what works, we literally change the game. Well, I think I've waffled on enough for one episode this week. Thank you so much for bringing me along on your dog walk today. I'm grateful as ever. And if this episode has reframed the way you see your dog's behavior, I would love to hear about it. Tag me on social media. I'm at Listen Dog Training, or send me a DM. And if you're ready to dive even deeper into a type of training that uses nothing but reinforcement to transform your dog's life for the better, you can check out all my online courses at listendogtraining.com. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your dog walk and the rest of your week. And if you haven't already, please DM me your training goals for this September. A handful of people have, and I am absolutely loving reading them and following those people's journeys. I will be continuing to post our updates for what we're up to this September on Instagram in my stories. But for now, it is goodbye from me, and I will see you next week for another episode of The Walk and Talk.